all, welcome back. So when we last left our whole Docker situation, so we have our Docker and compose file and we have our Docker files for the front end and back end, and it's working. You can see that we have some output on the front end. However, we have this little error here. So if we refresh the page, remember that when we first made this, we had it print something to the console if this was an error. So we refreshed once and didn't see anything. So if we refresh again, still don't see anything. We refresh it third time, then we start to see something. So the reason why this is occurring is because, well, not the error specifically, but why it only appears the third time is because by default, print statements in a Docker container are going to be buffered. So it's only when the logs reach a certain limit, then they're going to start printing out to the console. That's why on the third refresh, then we saw something. So what we can do, because that's not very convenient to have, considering we want to know right away if there's an issue, right? While we're still using the print commands too. We can set an environment of variable called PYTHONUNBUFFERED and set that equal to 1. And then if we build this again, it'll take a second to build. Alright, so now that that's built, we can go ahead and refresh the page. And look back at the console, we get output immediately. So that's good. The reason why it's the default behavior to have this buffer is because there is a slight performance benefit that you gain from having Python buffer itself before it gives you output. It's not significant, so we're safe to put this in here, but a better practice is to have logging anyway, which we'll set up a little bit later. So as we were talking about earlier about the motivations for using Docker, a great one is what we're doing right now, which is development, where we have kind of an isolated environment dictated by this Docker file here. And so we can just go ahead and give these Docker files to other developers, which they'll get from our source control repository, and then they'll just download that and work with that. It's also great it's used in a lot of production deployments. This is not necessarily how it's used though, because as you can see, like, our console is kind of hijacked here, so we can't really do anything. Well, we can open up a new console, but you can see if we try to like quit out of this, then it's going to stop the containers, and if we bring this back over, then now it's not going to be able to display anything. So what's usually done is you add on a -d flag here, and this will put it in detach mode, so that the container runs in the background. So as you can see, we have our console back now. So we can also bring back the browser over here, and you see that it's still up, still having that error message stuck in our face. So let's see what else we can do about that. So you might also argue that it's actually worse now, because if we bring this over again and refresh it, now we don't see any output at all. And that is kind of the flip side of being in detach mode. But there are still Docker logs that are output that trace all of those print statements. And the easiest way, you can use Docker Desktop, but I don't personally use that. So the easiest way that I like to see the logs is by using something called dozzle here. So I pulled up Docker Hub, and dozzle it's a package that I use very often, and it basically makes it so that you can see the logs. So as you can see, if we scroll down to like the Docker compose file here, then it basically has code which we literally just copy and paste into our Docker compose files. So just make sure I line it up with everything else. So we want it as a service. So we just paste it right here and then close everything. And so what we'll do is we'll actually use Docker compose down. So this will bring down the containers that are up. And we can just run docker compose up -d again. So I apparently forgot that I actually am using dozzle elsewhere on my system. That's how much you use it. And so we actually just need to rename this so we don't run into a naming issue. So we'll just call this CrossFit -dozzle. That should work. And then do docker compose up again. Right, so now we can see here that it is 8888 on the host machine, so I have that pulled up here. So if we scroll to this, then we see we have logs for both of these right now. Here's part of the advantage of dozzle is you can actually see all of the logs. So if we go here and refresh, then if we go to the front end, then we see these errors come through here. Okay, let's look at the actual error now. So we're trying to go to localhost. So this is on line 13 of plot.py. So let's go to that line first. So line 13. So here you can see it's going to localhost. So the reason that this is an issue in a Docker environment is localhost is not what we should be referencing. Since everything is in isolated container, that doesn't necessarily make sense. It's just referencing itself, its own container, rather than another container on the network. So every Docker compose file that you make here will actually, it'll set up its own network. You can see here, oh, I just noticed I have to zoom in a little bit, that it created a network called CrossFit Streamlit default. We didn't define a network in here. It just made that by default. Let's move that out of the way to see a little bit more. So we have to find another way to reference it, right? So in Docker World, the way that you do that is you use the actual name of the service in place of localhost or whatever you chose. So with that in mind, if we go back to plot.py and instead do backend, because that is the name of the service in here, right? So, and then if we do docker compose down, and then docker compose up -d. I think I forgot the build last time, so we'll put that back in for good measure. Oh, I forgot the actual up command. Docker compose up -d. Alright, so everything is built now. Let's bring this back over. Okay, so the error is still showing up. Let's take a look at the logs. Connected to backend. Are we... Okay. Okay, I think this is the problem. Is because, so on the back end, you also have an option for uh, the network that you're also sending it over. So you have to define something like that. So if you do 0.0.0.0, this will actually define the container that it will listen on all network interfaces rather than just like 127.0.0.1. So this is needed because it says when you're running in a Docker container, it says, hey, I want to listen from connections outside of the container too. So because this is in the Docker file, we have to actually do docker compose down, and then docker compose up -d -build. Okay, so it's rebuilt, so let's see. Okay, so it is back up and running, kinda. So we need to install Kaleido. If you remember, we actually got this error early on too in our development on WSL, and that's because we had to actually install Chrome. Now, since this is just running in a Docker container, then you need to get Chrome into the container. So let's go ahead and do that now. So if you remember, we installed Chrome. It wasn't using just pip like we've been doing for other development packages. We actually had to use aptitude because we had to install this on the system. So those same aptitude commands, we can do that in the Docker environment here. So I just copy and pasted a bunch of stuff because basically, honestly, I got it from ChatGPT. So what we're doing is we're installing and updating our repository. We're going to want to use wget to get the public key that we can use to get the Chrome package, and then we're basically just going to install that in our environment. So with that, we'll save that file, and then again, it's a Docker change, so we'll have to do docker compose down, and then docker compose up, build again. This might take a little while because it has to actually install everything now. Okay, so now it's all set, so let's check it out. We refresh this. Alright, now we have everything like we're used to seeing again. Great. Okay, cool. Everything is dockerized now. Alright, so I guess that's it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.